Welcome back. I'm Betsy Bosley, the dietitian with the Pathway to Health and Wellness program. Today we're going to be making several dishes using tofu. The reason why we have our boiling pot of water right here is we're going to be cooking whole wheat linguine noodles to kind of make an Asian noodle dish with vegetables and tofu and then delicious peanut sauce. And this pan right here will be sauteing the tofu. So we'll show you how to cook tofu if you've never made it before. There are many different types of tofu, and you can find them at your grocery store. I wanted to show you what they actually look like. The one on your left is an extra firm tofu, and this is a very kind of spongy texture. It holds together really well, so it works great in sauteing dishes like stir fries and things like that. And the tofu on your right is a silken tofu, and this tends to have a more custardy, smooth type of texture that purees very well in desserts and smoothies and even dips. And the extra firm tofu we'll be using today to make our stir fry, and the silken tofu we will be using to make a healthy strawberry cheesecake. All right. So the first step of the recipe, we're going to be taking this extra firm tofu, and it's packed in water to kind of keep it moist and fresh. So the first thing you have to do is drain the water. And there's a little plastic topping that kind of keeps everything intact. So I just slit it and then drain. And sometimes, depending on the recipe, you might want the tofu really dry. And so then you can press it. But in this recipe, we don't really need to do that. And so it just looks like a little block when you take it out. So we'll just pop it out. And then we're just going to be cutting it into cubes, just like you would chicken or beef or, any other kind of meat product. And it just slices really nicely. That's why I really like this extra firm tofu. And we'll just cut it into little cubes. You can kind of cube it as much as you'd like. The nice thing is it's perfectly square, which is always a tricky part about cutting because sometimes you get, vegetables or fruits that aren't square and they're a little harder to cut. So we just cube them. So you might be wondering where tofu comes from, and it is actually mashed and pressed soybeans. And soybeans are naturally high in protein, but they have no fat in them, so they're a great thing to add to our meals. So once we have our tofu cubes all cut up, then we're going to come over and we've got a pan on the stove and it's heated up a bit. Okay, so before I put the tofu in, I'm just going to put a little bit of oil, and the oil does help the tofu to brown a little bit on the edges. You don't have to add oil. You could just use water to cook it, and it will still firm up the tofu. It just might not brown as much, but that would be an, even less fat way to do it. So really carefully put the tofu in the pan. I like to kind of put it away from the oil because obviously the oil is really hot, and we want to avoid splattering like that. So we're going to just kind of saute the tofu in the pan with the oil, and I like to put a lid on it just because, as we've seen, you have to be a little careful about splattering. And that's kind of a nice way to keep the tofu protected, and it also helps it cook a lot faster. And as you can see, if I take the lid off, you'll see some of these edges are already browning just a little bit already. So that's kind of what you're looking for. You want all of the edges to be brown. Meanwhile, while these are cooking, we're going to come back to our pot of water, which I've brought to a boil. And I'm going to be using whole grain linguine. I like linguine. You could really use any kind of whole grain pasta or brown rice if you prefer. I kind of like noodles, and I like thick noodles. So that's why I do the linguine. So I'm just, pasta's always fun. So I'm just going to pour it in here. And poor pasta, it gets kind of a bad rap. If it's whole grain, it's going to give us a lot of fiber and be really filling, as well as pasta naturally doesn't have a lot of salt. It actually doesn't have any salt in it, so it's a really good choice for a grain. Just like any other food, I think sometimes it's easy to eat a lot of it, and so you want to be aware of portion size with pasta because sometimes we can eat too much, and that would give us too many calories and not help us stay at a healthy weight. So again, even though it's delicious, just be aware of portion size with pasta. All right, well, our pasta and tofu is cooking. We can make our sauce. To make our sauce, we have 1/3 cup warm water, and we are going to mix in 1/4 cup of peanut butter. And again, this is the same low sodium peanut butter that we've used before. And it's going to add some really good heart healthy fat. I like the peanut butter because it displaces some of the soy sauce that is used in traditional recipes. And not that soy sauce is bad, but it does tend to add a lot of salt to foods. And so we'll just mix it up. And it also adds a really nice flavor. And I like to get the crunchy peanut butter so it can add a little crunch. And then to this, we're going to add 1/4 cup of low sodium soy sauce. And this is a great choice. You can also find something called liquid aminos. And there's a coconut aminos that I found actually that's one of the lowest sodium out of all of these kind of savory things to use with Asian dishes. So you can definitely experiment and try different things, but regular soy sauce is just very salty, so I would try to avoid that. And then we've got some apple cider vinegar right here, and so we're going to use 2 tablespoons of that. And then to kind of contrast the tartness of the apple cider vinegar, we're going to add a little bit of sugar. And not very much, you know. Some Asian dishes have a lot of sugar that they add it, you know, in their really sweet dressings. This is just a little bit. 1 teaspoon is 4 grams of sugar. So in the whole recipe, it's 16 grams total. So that would make it about 2 grams of sugar per serving. So not too shabby, I don't think. All right. So we'll just mix that all up. Now that we're finished making our sauce, let's check and see how our tofu and noodles are going. So if we lift the lid off of the tofu, get a lot of steam. As you can see, the tofu is getting nice and golden brown right now. So just like I like it. And the next thing we're going to do is add some vegetables. And this is a really convenient way to get lots of vegetables in your diet, because I think it's really important that vegetables and fruits are the foundation of everything that we eat. And I love frozen vegetables and fruits just because they're so convenient. If you live by yourself, like I do, it's definitely nice. They don't go bad on you because, you know, there's just one person that you're cooking for. So, and we have lots of good stuff in here. It looks like we have some sugar snap peas, we have green beans, we have peppers and onions and water chestnuts, which I like a lot. Some broccoli. We were a little stingy with the broccoli. But anyway, so we were going to let this, probably put the lid on it, let this cook for a little bit longer, let the vegetables really get soft. So I'm going to put the lid on and let the vegetables cook for a moment while I go drain my pasta. So I'm going to go do that. Okay, so as you can see, our pasta is all drained and looking super delicious. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our vegetables and tofu, which are now all cooked, to the pasta. So we'll do that next. Just simmering away, and we will add this all in. 1 big pot. This is going to make a lot. This has 8 servings, so it's very great for a large crowd of people. Also great for leftovers. Yeah, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our delicious sauce to the pasta. So we'll just pour it in. And we'll use our pasta stirrer to stir it all up. Yeah. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to serve it up. So we've got our bowl. And so we'll just serve up a nice portion of this. Might be even a little bit more for an 1/8, but you can see it looks pretty good. Okay, and then over here we've got some toppings that look really nice on them. So we've got some green onions, we've got some cilantro right here, and then we can put some little crushed peanuts because I really like the peanutty crunch. Okay, and here we go. We have a beautiful dish. I think this is an Asian dish that anyone would enjoy. Now the next thing I wanted to do is compare this to a commercial Asian dish. So right here we have a frozen dinner that's Asian flavored. It's sesame chicken, and it's got 2 servings. And basically it runs around 400 calories, and it's got 21 grams of fat. It looks like there's a lot of there's some hydrogenated palm oil in this, which is definitely not a healthy fat. And there's also, the thing about frozen dinners, things like this, is they tend to have a lot of salt. So for 1 serving, and there's 2 servings in this bag, it's 980 milligrams of sodium, which is over half of what they recommend every day for salt. And our recipe right here is much less because, you know, we didn't just use soy sauce, and we also, the soy sauce that we used tended to be lower in salt. So that's a great way to cut the salt. This dish, you know, also has, you know, a coating on the outside of the chicken that has a lot of sugar. It also uses white flour. And again, you know, kind of contrast that to our whole wheat noodles here. And it does have some good vegetables, but again, you know, the vegetables are coated in salt and sugar. So, you know, the less you can do of that, the better. And like we talked about, this one is going to be much lower in salt, much lower in sugar. All right, so now that we've made our main dish, we're going to get right to dessert. And believe it or not, like I said before, we are going to be making a cheesecake out of tofu. And it's going to be a strawberry cheesecake. So I've got my fresh strawberries all cut up. And this is going to go on the top of the cheesecake. So I wanted to make sure these were nice and pretty. And the crust is pretty simple, just like a traditional cheesecake crust. It doesn't have any butter in it, so it's going to be a lot lower in fat than a traditional cheesecake crust. So this is about 9 graham crackers, or you can buy these packages of graham cracker crumbs, and it's about 1/3 of a box. And it's 5 ounces as well, if that helps you measure it out. And so this is our graham crackers. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add our sugar to our graham cracker crumbs. So we're going to just do about 1 tablespoon of sugar, and not too much. And then, like I said, no butter, and we're just going to moisten with our milk. And so we need about 2 tablespoons of the milk. We might need to adjust depending on what it looks like. All right, so we'll just stir it up. And it's not, you want it to kind of look like sand when it's all done. So enough moisture so you can press it into the bottom of your pan. So then we'll just pour it into the pan. And we'll just kind of press it into the bottom. We have our oven going right now, preheating to 350. Basically, we're just trying to bake the crust so it will get a little done, and so that way the filling won't soak and make it all soggy when we add the filling in a little bit. So now that we're all done with our crust and it's pressed into the bottom, we're going to take it to the oven and get ready to bake it. Okay, so now that we're all pressed into our pan, we're going to take it over the oven and bake it. All right, so now we've had our cheesecake crust in the oven for about 10 minutes at 350. So I'm going to take it out. It smells really good. It's nice and brown. So we'll keep the oven on because we still need to bake our cheesecake after we finish making the filling. So I will start doing that now. All right, so we're going to make our delicious filling. Like I said earlier, silken tofu is definitely the best tofu to use for baked products like this. So like our tofu before, we're just going to slit it and drain it that way. Okay, so we've got it all drained, and so we're going to put it, this is what the silken tofu looks like. It's really soft. It almost looks like yogurt or something. And now we're going to put it in our blender. So I'm going to put in 10 ounces of the silken tofu, Okay, so we're doing 8 ounces of a Neufchâtel cheese. It's just a lower fat cream cheese. And I've been letting it sit out for a little while to let it soften. Just goes in the blender not much better that way. It will just put it right in the blender. And when it's this soft, it just goes in really nicely. So we're going to combine these two. Okay, so we're going to combine these two, and then we'll add the rest of our ingredients. This pops in. I'll turn it on and puree it. Although, okay, that looks nice and pureed. And so we'll open this up, and then we're going to zest some lemon. So you can use a zester, you can use a cheese grater too in a pinch. That works as well too. So it calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of lemon zest. You can use more or less depending on your preference. And then we have about a 1/2 cup of strawberries, and we're just going to puree these in with the rest of our filling ingredients. So we'll add those in.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and our last ingredient is the vanilla, and it just really enhances the flavor of any dessert. So we'll just do 1 teaspoon. All right. And now we're going to puree everything. So we'll pop our lid on. There we go. Okay, and then we'll get it started again. I'm just going to scrape the edges just a bit. Make sure we get all of our filling in there and pureed. And so then we'll just come over here to our crust, and we'll just put the filling on top of the crust. And make sure we get most of it out, because we don't want to waste any of this deliciousness. And obviously you could use other fruits in this. I think anything in the berry family would be really delicious. You know, blueberries and that sort of thing. You probably could do like some sort of like mango cheesecake too. That might be really yummy. So, okay, so we're all ready to put this in the oven now. Okay, so our oven is still at 350 from when you made the crust. So we're going to put this in for 30 minutes. All right, so we're putting it on a hot pad. And as you can see, it's going to be a little softer than a regular cheesecake, but so it'll have a little bit of jiggle, but it should be pretty kind of jello-y consistency. So, and it'll get a little thicker too as it cools. All right, so it is ready to just kind of cool on the counter for a little bit. Then I'm going to put it in the fridge for a few hours to let it set up. And you could even leave it in overnight, and then you're ready to decorate it after those few hours. All right, so you can kind of decorate it however you want. I like to just put strawberries on. You could drizzle a little bit. This might be really pretty for kind of a Valentine's Day dinner or something kind of festive like that. So I wanted to compare our beautiful strawberry pie with the store-bought cheesecake. Now I thought when I got this it would be 1 serving, and it turns out it's actually 4 servings. So it's pretty crazy. You know, I would eat the whole thing myself. But if you divided it into quarters, each serving is 170 calories, which if you ate the whole thing like I would, it'd be 680 calories. There are 6 grams of saturated fat. So again, if you ate this whole thing, it would be 24 grams of saturated fat. And they recommend maxing out at about 15 grams of saturated fat per day. And it has 11 grams of sugar. So total it'd be 44 grams of sugar. So in contrast, our healthy pie right here has about 1/4 of the calories per serving, and it is less carbohydrate. It is much less fat, about 1/8 of the fat, and a big part of that is because we're using that tofu instead of cream cheese, which traditional cheesecake would use. Okay, I hope you've become a little bit more familiar with how using tofu in food products can create a delicious meal without all of the fat and with good amounts of protein. Thank you for watching.